We're excited to share more bonus content with you. In this episode, our summer clerk, Gillian Katz Lamon, interviews Jocelyn Yow, an elected official, advocate, mom, and most recently, children's book author. Jocelyn shares her experiences creating policies to support children and families. This interview focuses on Jocelyn's experience advocating for improved family leave policies. Before we dive in, we'll take a moment to share some basic context about family leave policies and links to where you can learn more. Family leave generally refers to an employee takes time away from work to spend caring for a new child or family member and benefits related to that. Paid leave means that the person receives at least a portion of their usual compensation during their leave. Unpaid leave means the person does not receive compensation during their leave. The US does not have a national paid family leave program. Most countries do. The Federal Family and Medical Leave Act, FMLA, provides eligible employees with 12 weeks of unpaid leave with job protection. The Federal Employee Paid Leave Act, FELPA, provides covered federal government employees with 12 weeks of paid parental leave, PPL. About 13 states, including California, have enacted mandated paid family leave policies in their states. For example, California Family Paid Leave Act provides eligible employees with payments of about 60 to 70% of weekly wages for up to 8 weeks. Some people have access to other family leave options and benefits through their employers. In practice, this means that whether a person has access to paid family leave depends on where they live and who their employer is. Here are some links to where you can find more information about these policies. We hope you enjoy the interview. So let's get started.
Hi everyone, my name is Gillian Katz Lamon. I'm a summer law clerk for the mental health team at National Center for Youth Law, and I'm so excited for our conversation today with Jocelyn Yow. Before we get into it, we're going to be referencing laws and legal information in this segment, but we will not be providing legal advice. So today we're going to be talking about paid family leave. Paid family leave programs provide benefits to qualifying individuals who need to take time off work for a variety of reasons. I'm super thrilled to introduce our guest, Jocelyn, and our expert for this conversation. She has a super stacked resume of being an Eastvale City Council member and formerly the youngest woman of color to serve as mayor for Eastvale. She's the legislative advocacy director at Ignite National and mom to a 4-year-old son, Caden. So thank you so much for joining us today, Jocelyn. We are so excited to have you.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to this conversation.
So to get started, what motivated you to get into local politics and public service at such a young age? 23 for your first city council member election, and then 25 for your mayoral race.
Yeah, growing up, politics was not something that my family would talk about. My mom was a refugee from Vietnam, and my dad an immigrant from Malaysia. So, politics, especially American politics, was very foreign to them. They did not quite understand it. Like they understood the big picture. We have the president, the vice president, and senators, something like that. And that was it, right? And so we never really talk about politics. And also, like many, many other families, the my parents' priority was making sure that there's food on the table, making sure that mortgage was paid off, making sure that my brother and I got good education. And that was their focus, right? So they never really thought about anything else. With that being said, my dad was big on public service. He would always bring us, especially me, I remember, he would always bring me on to different community events and we would volunteer for different causes. And so that was a big part of my identity growing up. Um, but that changed when I got to college. So I enrolled at my local community college, Norco College, and while I was there, embodying the spirit of giving back and community service that my dad had instilled in me. My first semester at college, I would go around to all the different clubs and I went to different people, and I would just ask them, how can I help? That was the question. How can I help? How can I help? I would just like go from table to table, from person to person. How can I help? How can I help? And a service organization on campus called AGS, they were like, well, we could use your help because we're volunteering at this upcoming community event in the city of Corona. And I was like, sure. Did not know what I signed up for. All I knew was when, where to show up. That was it. So I showed up. It was a weekend. And I volunteered at a park. That was my first event. And then they were like, oh, like, come join us at the next event. And the next thing I know, I was at a state of the city for the City of Eastvale, registering people as they walked in and checking in folks. And the next thing I know, I was at this event. And then one day, a few weeks in, someone was like, "Well, you're really involved. Like, you should consider student government." And I was like, "No idea what that is. Did not know." But I was like, "Sure, whatever you say, right? Like, as long as I can get more involved, cool." Got involved in student government, and that was my introduction to politics and government. I remember the first bill that I worked on when I was in student government, was to ensure undocumented students have access to financial aid. Yes, we do have access, undocumented students have access to financial aid now, but that was not the case 15 years ago. And I remember working on that bill. And then also back then, I used to have to take buses to go to school. And I live in the Inland Empire. If anyone knows anything about the IE, is that you need a car. You need a car because everything is so spread out. And unfortunately, I had to take buses, and my campus, even though it was not that far away, like probably 25-minute drive, but when you're taking a bus, that took me 2.5 hours. And as you know, at the same time as all these things were happening, as I started learning more about politics, government, how decisions are being made, I started thinking to myself, and I remember it was raining this one day, and I was waiting at the bus stop, and I thought to myself, why is this happening? How is this happening? How is it that I have to take a 2.5 hour bus ride every day just to take that one class, that one English class that I needed to graduate, right? Like to transfer. And I started looking into my school board. I started looking into school board, into city council. That was my introduction to local politics, because student government introduced me to state politics. And then at the same time, I was doing my own research about local politics. And that's when I realized there are people who make decisions that affect our daily lives. People who make decisions about bus route, about bus stops, about city development, about your classes, how much money goes into your court, your college, all of that, everything, every little thing, your street light, the water you drink, the air you breathe, everything. There are people who make decisions affecting every little things in your life. I mean, heck, I even learned that there's a mosquito board. I don't know if that's the case all across the country,
I did not
but
know that.
yeah, but where I live, there's a mosquito board. And so, even the mosquitoes. And so literally everything. And that's when I told myself, I was 17 at that time. I told myself, I was 17. Yes. What I did was, I told myself, I'm going to come back. I'm going to transfer, go to Berkeley. And when I come back, I'm going to run for office. And that was exactly what I did.
That's awesome. I mean, setting out the game plan and then executing it perfectly is not something that everybody can claim to have done and actually done it. So kudos to you for that. Um, Other than, becoming a mom, but I'm sure that was a big part of it, what sparked your interest in including paid family leave as a policy that you were going to pursue?
Yeah, well, being a mom, definitely that was a
I'm
big
sure.
part of it. Yeah. Um, I think it was a whole host of things, right? Being a mom, being a single mom, giving birth during the pandemic. I
Yeah.
think that just made everything worse. And I remember thinking to myself when I first went back to work, as like I will admit I'm a little bit of a workaholic. So yes, as excited as I was to go back to work, it was really, really challenging, like very challenging. And reality sets in pretty quickly. First week I was like, yeah, pump. And then second week I was like, oh shoot, how am I gonna do this? Um, and I started thinking I can't be the only one, right? Like, and I have the luxury of at that time, or actually, so what I do, I work for Ignite, a national nonprofit organization, and most of the work that we do is remote. And so even with remote work, it was still really hard. And I remember thinking to myself, well, A, I can't be the only one who feel this way, right? And and B, how the hell are other parents doing it? Like parents who
Yeah.
actually have to go back to the office. And at that time, especially during the pandemic, I mean, it is an ongoing issue, but especially during the pandemic, your childcare facilities were closed, and so parents had no access to childcare facilities. And I remember seeing some of my friends had to go back to office like few months in, and I recognized that I was definitely in a more privileged situation, but it was hard. And so I was also working on my master's degree at that time. And so I was like, well, I needed to work on a capstone project. And I was like, well, let me look into this. I'm already looking into this anyway, right? Let me do more research. And wow, learn a lot about pay family leave or the lack of pay family leave in the United States and how that affects not just parents but society and our country. And I also got to learn about the different models that different states have introduced in the past few decades, and very fascinating, and happy to share that as we continue this conversation.
Yeah. I mean, that in my research, I did not know that you also did a master's exploration of paid family leave. That's like such a good foundation to have going into leading policy on that. So, could you share a little bit more about what the process of getting your paid family leave program in Eastvale passed looked like? Like, was there a big opposition? What were the arguments presented against it, if any? And how has the response been since passing the program?
Yeah, so um, it's been on my mind for a few years, but I was always waiting for the perfect timing to introduce this. A lot of things about, that's the downside of politics and government sometimes is that things don't move as fast as we want to. And so I had been waiting and timing it. And then when this came up, so what happened is that, it's been a while since we have done any cost of living adjustment, since we have um, updated our policies. And so I was like, wow, this is the perfect timing to do that. And so I was like, well, and one of the how we're doing it is that, we're looking at different neighboring cities, what they're offering, what are the benefits they're offering, how much are they paying their employees. And so we're doing a comparison, right? Like, are we comparable when we look at other cities, how we're paying our employees versus other cities? And so that was the first step. And then the second step too was we also talked to our employees. We sent out a survey and we asked them, what is it that you want, right? Like, what is it that you need to thrive in the workplace? And And so we sent out the survey and we received the results. And the number one thing that the employees wanted was pay family leave, pay parental leave. Yeah. And that was something that I had pushed for. I had emailed our HR person. I said, hey, when we send out the survey, can we make sure that we include family friendly policies as an option for them to choose from? So, whether it's paid parental leave or childcare benefits, all that stuff, like, can we just make sure we include all of that? And then even before that, one of the policies that I had implemented in the city of Eastvale was even offering a 529 account option. So what a 529 account provides is that, it gives parents the option to save up for their kids' college education. Not a lot of workplaces do offer that, but it's such a basic service. It doesn't cost the city a dime, but just giving that option to parents and helping them set their kids up for success, that was a big deal, right? So that was, a few years ago, we went from 529 to now pay parental leave. That was the number one thing that employees wanted, which made my job easier to ask for a pay parental leave, because when I went to my colleague, it's easier to say, hey, this is not the number one thing that our employees want, right? So that already helped me. That was like half of the battle. With that being said, majority of my colleagues are small business owners. And as we know, and as I've done my research, a lot of the oppositions for paid parental leave actually come from small businesses, right? And so even though they are acting as council member, but we have to recognize that that's their lived experience, that's their background as small business owners. And so yes, there was a little bit of resistance, and some even said, like, why should we pay for someone who's not working? That was one of the arguments. And I will say, yes, even with the data, even with everything that was presented, I don't think that really swayed anyone that much. But what really changed was having a male ally. So the mayor right now, who's current right now for the city of Eastvale, he is a huge champion for especially paid maternity leave, and that really helped, having a male ally to step up to challenge our other colleagues' notion and perspective of paid parental leave. Having a male ally completely changed the game, which is very unfortunate. It should not be the case.
Yeah.
But it really did. They listened to him, and at some point, someone even said, it was like, one of the guys actually said, well, if we're not going to provide paid parental leave, we might as well not hire women. Like, how do you expect women to work, right? And that's when everyone just, kept quiet. And that was the end of it. The case was made, point was made, and yeah, that was it. That was the last thing that was said and done. You don't need data or anything. Sometimes you just need to just point it out as it is, I guess. Anyway, so that was how we were able to convince our colleagues, and when it came for voting, it actually passed with 4-0, only because it would have been 5, but someone wasn't able to make it. So yeah, 4-0. So it was unanimous. Yep. But
That's amazing.
It did take a male ally. And so for everyone who is listening, I will encourage, especially the men out there, to step up, be an ally, right? Like, if you see, in my case, it was 4 men in the room versus me. And at first I was getting very frustrated and frankly hard, right? Like, as the only woman, the only woman of color, the youngest person in the room, and constantly and feeling like I have to defend my position against four other people. That was hard. That was hard, right? But having one person joining me on the other side, like that helped a lot. So to all the men who are listening, step up, be an ally. If you're ever in a situation like this, like just help amplify your colleagues' voice and help champion for policies like paid parental leave.
Yeah, I mean, especially because like the ideal of paid parental leave or paid family leave, it helps you too. Like it is a benefit for you too. It is not only for like new moms or moms who have, just recently had another child. It's for a whole host of reasons that you might need to take off work, whether that's taking care of a loved one, an emergency family situation, or having a child. Like those are not things that are exclusive to new moms. That is crazy that you brought up that like point of that someone mentioned, we might as well not hire women. One of the like biggest counter arguments that I read to the expansion of paid family leave policies is that unless it's paired with some sort of guarantee for continued employment, people were making the argument that women would be disadvantaged because they are more likely to be fired due to paid family leave programs. I'm so curious what your response is to that argument, what you think of it. Yeah.
Oh, you're absolutely spot on. I'm not even going to refute that. You are absolutely spot on. In fact, that is an issue that we're seeing even here in the state of California. Because yes, some states like the state of California offer 60 to 70% of the pay, but there's no guarantee of your job when you return, or that there's a whole host of things, and we know that especially for workers who like marginalized communities. Well, first of all, actually, let me backtrack. Let me just point out the fact that 60 to 70% of the pay is not enough. I mean, actually, that was the reason why I went back to work immediately right after I used up all my vacation days, my sick days. I could not afford to take 60 to 70% of my pay. That's a 30 to 40% cut, right? Like I can't afford that. And and I know a lot of people, and there's studies, and that was what I was studying. That was what I was looking at for my master's project, is that it actually harms women of color and marginalized communities even more. Like the policy that we have here in California right now, the existing policy that we have actually widens the gap between white women and women of color. Because guess who's taking those 60, 70%
Oh yeah.
of their pay?
Yeah.
Not me, not us.
Yeah.
We are not giving up those 30 to 40% of our pay at a time when our expenses actually increase. Like this is the time when we need the money the most.
Yeah.
So why are we paying parents less? So here in the state of California, that's actually an issue. That is indeed an issue, is that women of color are not taking it because they can't afford to take less pay, A. And then second, there is no guarantee that they will come back to a job, right? And I'm very fortunate that I have that job guarantee, or I think I have that job guarantee with Ignite, but I know that's not the case for a lot of people. And so that is a flaw. That is a flaw in the system. And former Senator Lorena Gonzalez, huge champion labor, amazing legislator, and just amazing person over all around. She recognized that problem. She recognized that issue, and she actually tried to change that. While she was in the state Senate, she introduced a bill that would offer 100% paid parental leave, pay family leave in the state of California. That didn't go anywhere. And so she came back, she tried again, and she said, what about 90%? I remember this. I was following the bill, went from 100% to 90%, and still no. Her colleagues would not take it on. Very frustrating. I wish we could just offer, up to 100%. That would be life-changing for a lot of families, because yes, it's actually very harmful right now what we're doing in the state of California, because moms of color, parents of color cannot, they cannot afford 60 to 70% of the leave. And not having a job protection of any form. And so, they just simply cannot afford to do that.
Oh, well, I'm feel hopeful that we have advocates like you who can pave the way and set models in their local communities. Local politics are so overlooked and not given, enough importance in what makes a difference for an individual tomorrow or the day after that.
Yeah.
So
In
what
fact,
do you, yeah.
Yeah, in fact, I would like to share. So what the City of Eastvale does, and recognizing that that's a problem, is that we offer up to 100%. So instead of 60 to 70%, we are offering up to 100%. The
That's
only
awesome.
exception is if you make I can't remember, if you make almost $200,000, then there's a cap. Okay, you're not gonna get two. It's
Yeah.
basically, so instead of, so how the City of Eastvale is doing it, it's reverse, right? Instead of harming our employees who are making less, we're not going to penalize them for providing them less. So we're flipping the script. So we're not penalizing our employees who make less. Those who make less are actually getting 100% of their pay during this time of their lives. And so we're doing it a little bit different, and we'll see. I don't know. We just started this. Well, it just went into effect a month ago, so it's still pretty new.
Oh my
I
God.
don't think anyone has tried it out. But I would like to think that this will help our employees, especially those who are just starting out or those who are getting paid less. I think that will really help them, instead of, the senior management who make a lot more, whether it's $200,000 or whatnot. And so yeah, there is still a cap, but that cap is only applicable towards those who are making way more. Like, we're talking about $200,000.
That's amazing, Jocelyn, that you guys have kind of flipped the script and, come up with a system that is proactive in trying to narrow income gaps
And
between,
equitable. Like, I think
yeah,
this system is way more equitable than
totally,
just capping it at 60, 70% all across the board.
definitely. So I know it's only been, in effect for a month, but do you think this is a model that could be, you know, taken forward and used by other localities? Is it feasible to expand it to larger areas like states? Yeah, what do you think the pathway forward is to a universal paid family leave?
Yeah, I think it is definitely a model that all cities should look into. Are we perfect? Absolutely not. But I think this is a really, really good start. I will share that when I was doing my research for my master's, I personally think the model would be Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So I don't know how much you know about the foundation, but so when I was looking at what would be like the perfect pay family leave model, it does exist, y'all. It actually does exist. And I was looking at Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So let me pull up some stats, because I also don't want to misquote anything. They offer some of the most generous benefits that you'll find in the United States, at least. I'm sure there are in other countries. But so what they
Yeah.
offer is that they offer 26 weeks of paid parental leave. 26. So that's like 6 months. And when you come back, you get a $20,000 childcare stipend. $20,000 childcare stipend, because we know after 6 months you still have to take care of the kids, right? We
Yes.
know that, right? Just to make sure,
Kind of locked in there.
Yeah. So you still have to, find a way to take care of your kids while you still go to work. So yes, they offer $20,000 of childcare stipend. And this is, so how they got here was actually initially they started with 52 weeks of paid parental leave. It wasn't 26. They started with 52 weeks of paid parental leave, but they had to
Wow.
reduce it to 26 weeks. So their study, so I was looking at the research from the Society for Human Resource Management and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So the sweet spot, it's actually 6 to 12 months of paid parental leave. Anything more than that, and even here in the United States, especially, or even like I would say, like, even though I said 6 to 12, but even towards the tail end, research. So what they did find was that when you offer too long of a paid parental leave, which was the case with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, it actually hurts women's career. It hurts women's career. It slows down their career advancement. And in the long run, yeah, it does hurt women's career, unfortunately, at least here in the United States. With that being said, anything shorter than 3 to 4 months, it might be premature, because typically if you have had a baby, you'll know this. They have yet to sleep through the night. The cost of childcare is more expensive for kids who are much younger. And also, frankly, babies just want, they want to bond with their parents, and vice versa. Parents want to bond with their babies. And so the sweet spot, it's a little bit over around 6 months to a little bit over 6 months, and which is what the foundation is doing. So they're offering 26 weeks. They also recognize that, they don't want to hurt women's chances of advancement. And that's why they're offering that $20,000 cash for parents to use towards childcare. So I actually think that is the model, is that, yeah, unless we have a complete culture shift in the United States,
Yeah.
where all of us, everyone is supportive of working parents and kids and family, until then, I think this is the perfect model. Is it cheap? No.
Yeah.
No. Is
But
it feasible at every company? I don't think so. But is it possible, especially for some of the, bigger companies and perhaps even the government? I think it's worth looking into it, right? I do think it's worth looking into it. But yeah, so that's, personally, I actually think this is one of the models that works best for working parents.
yeah, when you were saying that, I mean, the culture shift would have to be huge. And like the first thing that popped into my mind is, oh, like why can't they have, back end assurances that, new moms won't be penalized for taking really long leave and like prevented from advancing. But that is frankly just too much to ask, apparently.
I know, right? Like, it's so much to ask for in the United
Yeah.
States. Like,
Oh,
one can always dream. But yeah, unless we have a complete change of culture, which is, yeah, I don't know when that's gonna happen. But and I think that's the biggest difference, right, between Europe and the United States. I know a lot of
yeah.
times people like to use Europe as an example, but it's such a different culture, right? Like, I mean, here in the United States, parents might get penalized for taking time off to bond with their kids. In Europe, even dads, if you know, if dads don't take time off after the birth of a child, like their colleagues will be like, what are you doing here? Why are you not at home helping your partner? Why are you not
Yeah.
bonding with your kid? Like, this is terrifying. Why are you here? Versus the United States, it's like, we need you to come back like right now. I don't care if your partner just gave birth, like come like right now, right? That's the difference. And so unless we have a complete change of culture, at least for now, that will, you know, that's what I can think of.
Yeah.
It's yeah, the Gates Foundation. They have a really good model there. But yeah, or the City of Eastvale. Baby steps, right? We gotta start somewhere.
How has being a mom, particularly a mom of a young child, informed your work both as a politician and a youth advocate at Ignite National?
Yeah. Oh, where do I even begin? It definitely made me look at things from a different lens. Like, whenever I look at a policy, I think, how is this policy family friendly? How can family benefits from this policy? How can kids benefit from this policy? So now whenever I look at a piece of policy, I think about like family, kids. Um, and also, like, I would really like to, you know, baby steps, one can always dream, change the culture of how we as a society treat families and kids, right? And it's the little things. Like, I'll give you an example. When I was, you know, I was in Germany recently, and I was traveling with Kaden. And I did not realize that we had to pay to reserve seats, or else you would have to stand. And so I didn't pay to reserve a seat. And it was a 2.5, 3 hour train ride. And the train was completely packed. And so we got on the train, and I was like, oh crap, we're going to have to stand. Someone, this guy and his son, his teenage son, by the way, do you know how hard it is to deal with teenager? But this guy with his teenage son, who was like 15 years old, they got up. They got up and they were like, we pay for these 2 seats. You and your son can have it. I was like, what? Uh, Mind blown at that
Yeah.
moment. First of all, to get a teenager to give up his seat, that in itself, it's a whole different level. But anyway, they gave up their seat, and yeah, Hayden and I sat there instead, and they just stood there for a while until they were able to find empty seats, as you know, as people hop off along the way. But that, unfortunately, I'm just gonna say this. I hope I'm wrong. I could be wrong. But for the most part, that doesn't happen in the United States, right? Like, that doesn't. Like, I mean, even when you're flying on the airplane, I think that's a really good example of, like, people will not give up their seats, even when families need to be seated together with young kids. You know, like, you hear it all the time. It's like, well, I pay for this seat. Like, why should I give up my seat for you, right? And so it's such a different culture. Where, you know, in other parts of the world, there are cultures that prioritize families, kids, especially little kids. And that is, I feel like that is not necessarily the case in the United States. And so, you know, that even working towards that culture shift, that's something that, you know, every day, little things I do, there are little things that we can do to help out, right? And I would challenge everyone who's listening, right? Like, be that village to other parents. When you see other parents who are struggling on the road, whether it's needing help with carrying a stroller or a car seat, or that they just need help, you know, because their kids are throwing a big fuss, like, offer that help, right? Be that village. And if you see a mom or a dad or a parent, you know, having too much, I see this way too often, like, where parents would be pushing the stroller, and then there's a door, and they're like, oh, I have to, like, do this really awkward thing where, like, they one hand pushing the stroller and one hand, like, trying to, like, keep the door open. my goodness, just go up, hold the door open for them. Like just little things right there, right? Like, people always think, oh, like we need to change the country. We need to make it a better place. Start with those little things. Like be a better person and help with those little things. And that's how you change the culture when everyone steps up in our daily lives and contribute in small or big way. It doesn't matter. And that's how we can change the culture. But until then, it's not going to change. Like, right? Like next time, just step up and help out. So, and also, one thing that totally not related to this, I don't know if you want to keep it, cut it out, up to you.
No.
But, as I work at Ignite, so I train, what I do for my full-time job at Ignite is that I train young women across the country to run for office, to be civically engaged. And what's scary as for me, as I'm doing that, and I'm like, it's great to see a lot of young women, young girls stepping up. And then I'm also seeing the disconnection between young girls and young boys. There's a lot of study, my next research. I love doing this to myself. There's a growing gap between girls and boys when it comes to their ideology, political ideology. More and more young boys are becoming very conservative, and more young girls are becoming very liberal. And the problem is they're not talking to each other, or more accurately, I feel like they're not listening to each other, right? And I noticed that, there's a lot of research that has shown that, that is alarming. And that's not just in the United States, by the way. This is across Europe. They even in Asia, certain parts of Asia. So from the studies that I've seen, they use Germany as a case study, Japan as a case study, and then the United States. In all three countries, boys and girls are becoming very polarized, very, very polarized. And that is going to become a big issue down the road. And so, I recently brought nearly 200 young women, young girls from all across the state of California to Sacramento for a day of advocacy. My favorite part of my job. So I brought them to the state capitol, and we advocated for menstrual equity and also to stop sexual assault and sexual harassment in public colleges and universities. And so these were, I thought were like pretty heavy topic, especially talking about sexual assault and sexual harassment on campus. I was worried that the middle school students I brought with me would not be able to comprehend all of that. And on top of that, one of my colleagues decided to bring her little brother to the event. He was like, I don't know how old, he was like 11, 12 years old. So quite young. My colleague made her brother sit through the entire training. And the whole time I was thinking, A, are my middle school girls gonna comprehend any of these things? And then B, is that little boy back there okay? Like, is he understanding any of these things? Turns out, yes, the middle school girls, not only do they comprehend it, they live it. They said, yeah, we might not be in college, but we experience sexual harassment even starting at a middle school. And that completely broke my heart. Starting at middle school, they experience sexual harassment and even sexual discrimination, especially, they told me, at STEM, like especially in STEM classes. So there was that, A. And then B, regarding the little boy, so after the event, I talked to his sister, my colleague, and I was like, hey, how did he take it? Like, was it too much for him? Like, did he understand any of that? And she said he understood it. Like, he got it. Like, it opened up his eyes. Like, he had never heard anyone talk about those challenges before in his circle. He did not know about period poverty. He did not know about the struggle of going through a period and not being able to find menstrual products on a monthly basis. He did not know how those issues affect his classmates, his peers. And then obviously with the sexual assault, harassment, discrimination, he did not know that. He did not know that. And yet he went to school, with these girls. Like, they share the same classroom, and yet they're not sharing their experience with each other, right? Like, it's like no one is communicating their experience, their lived experience with each other. And so you're just in your circle, and you form your own opinion based on your circle. And and trust me, it gets harder and harder to change that as you get older and older. You become a teen, you become an adult, and next thing you know, you start typing all your opinion and stuff on Facebook and social media. And once that's formed, it's so much harder to change that. And I've been thinking a lot about, like, how can we start having that conversation at a young age before we all become stubborn teenager
Yeah.
and adults. And so anyway, that's been keeping up at night, because obviously I'm raising a son, a boy, whom, I worry about that. Like, I'm thinking about that, like, 5 years from now, as he starts elementary school, middle school, is he going to be given that space to have that conversation with his peers, his classmates, to
Mhm.
have that better understanding. And so anyway, I don't know where I'm going with this, but
I mean,
those
I
those
will
are the things
say,
that those are the things that keep me up at night as a parent.
it seems like you are taking the steps and taking it in your own hands to find ways to communicate to young people about being civically engaged and getting involved. Shout out to your new book, Voting with Mommy. Could you, yeah, this can be like our last little bit. Could you tell us about your book and, yeah,
Yeah.
what it's been like writing it and what the message you want to send with it is?
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, yes, I recently published a children's book, Voting with Mommy. It's been 3 years in the making, actually. Um, I've been working on this book for a while, and the idea came about when I had Caden, and then when I was serving as the mayor. And I've been bringing him to every election. Like, every time I went to vote, I would bring him with me. Back then, I used to bring him to pretty much every single council meeting. We still do. In fact, just yesterday, he went to a meeting with me. He enjoys it. Like, he loved it. He loved seeing mommy, me, voting and, like, taking part in the community, being involved. And it's so important that we start having this conversation and start bringing kids and get them involved, show them the process of voting, the whole thing. I think it's so important that we start early, because, studies have shown that families, especially the moms, who tend to be the primary caregivers, play a crucial role in shaping a child's political behavior. When parents talk about politics at the dining table, when parents have strong civic habits, when parents talk about the news, talk about how decisions are being made, their kids are more likely to prioritize civic engagement. And I learned this, as I shared earlier. Growing up, my parents never talk about politics, or I had to learn them on my own. But when I was in college, so I remember going to my friend's house, and I remember going to my friend's house, and we were having dinner. And my friend's parents, they asked me, "So, Jocelyn, what do you think about this?" I remember looking into them, like, looking straight at them, and I was like, and thinking in my head, I was like, are they testing me? Like, do they really want to know what I think about this issue? Because growing up in my family, there are two things you don't talk about at the dining table: politics and religion. You don't
Yeah.
talk about those two things ever, right? You don't talk about those two things at the dining table. You don't talk about those two things when you're talking to strangers, especially. And so having my friend's parents first time meeting them, asking me about political issue, I was like, uh, I don't know. Like, I remember like just like shrinking myself and like thinking like I'm not gonna say anything. Like, why should I say anything? I don't want to offend them because I was taught to never talk about politics and religion, especially meeting
Yeah.
strangers. And then after I said that, they were like, okay. And then they went on to have a whole conversation. The whole time we were eating, they were talking about politics the whole time. And I was like, no. In my mind, I remember thinking, no way, people actually talk about politics at the dining table. And that was such a, like, like, a light bulb just went off in my head. I remember, and this was like when I was 17. And I realized I was like, it has to start from home. And this was even before I had Kaden, before I became a mom. It starts from home. And that explains why my friend
Yeah.
was so politically involved and civically engaged and all that. And it's because it started at home. And so with this book, I really hope that it will inspire parents, families to talk about the importance of being civically engaged, the importance of voting, the importance of getting involved in your local community, starting at a young age. So that's the hope. That's my hope with this book.
I think that is a perfect note to end on. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me.
And thank you all for having me.